He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a threat. He was a scientist, alone in his lab, working on a discovery that could change lives. But hatred doesn't care about brilliance. That night, the lock rattled. The door burst open, and 3 men in police uniforms stormed inside. At first glance, they looked like authority. But their badges were fake, their intentions real. They didn't come to protect, they came to destroy. They thought the law was on their side. What they didn't know was that the moment they stepped inside, they triggered a truth so shocking it could never be buried again. And one shocking truth, revealed in the end, would change how you see the world forever. Dr. Elijah Carter was no stranger to suspicion. From childhood, he had been marked not by his achievements, but by the color of his skin. Teachers questioned his intelligence, neighbors avoided him, doors closed before he could even knock, but he refused to let the world define him. That resilience carried him to the university halls where he earned degrees no one expected him to achieve. Even there, surrounded by prestige and intellect, he felt the weight of doubt. Colleagues whispered, students stared, administrators reminded him subtly, sometimes openly, that his place was precarious. Still, Elijah thrived. He turned rejection into fuel, prejudice into purpose. By day, he taught physics, commanding classrooms with brilliance that could not be denied. By night, he retreated to his sanctuary, a small lab tucked behind an old brick building. There, he worked on something extraordinary. His invention wasn't just about circuits and power, it was about equality, a device capable of providing clean, endless energy to communities left behind, those denied resources because of poverty or race. But buried deep within it was something more, a hidden function, a secret he rarely admitted even to himself. If activated, it could reveal not just scientific truth, but human truth, a shocking revelation the world wasn't ready for. He often thought of it as a safeguard. Others would see it as a weapon. Whispers had already begun to spread. Rumors about the black professor with secrets. Speculation twisted into suspicion, and suspicion in a prejudiced society was never harmless. Elijah reassured himself. Truth is protection. But as he adjusted his glasses one night, reviewing notes under the flicker of a lamp, he had no idea that danger was already walking toward his door, dressed in uniforms designed to deceive. The first warnings were subtle. A note on his office door. Stay in your place. The letters were thick, pressed hard into the paper as though anger alone had carved them. A week later, his lab window shattered. Across the brick wall in red spray paint, "We know what you're doing." He cleaned it quietly. He didn't report it. What good would it do? In his experience, justice rarely showed up for people like him. But the unease grew. A car lingered outside his lab one night, headlights off, the silhouette of men inside faintly visible. The next night, footsteps echoed on the sidewalk long after midnight. Slow, deliberate, as though waiting. Elijah buried himself in his work, refusing to yield. But on the night it happened, even his determination faltered. It began with a knock, 3 sharp raps against the lab door. "Police!" A voice barked. Elijah's chest tightened. He hadn't called them. He hadn't done anything wrong. Before he could respond, the lock rattled. Metal scraped against metal. The door swung open. 3 figures stepped in, uniforms crisp, badges glinting under flashlight beams. But something felt off. Their badges were too clean, their voices too rehearsed. Real authority doesn't need to announce itself with such force. "We've had complaints," one said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Suspicious activity. Late nights. People don't feel safe." Elijah opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the second man slammed a flashlight onto the table, knocking papers to the floor. "Search the place," he ordered. The third man swung a baton at a shelf, shattering glass beakers. He laughed, the sound hollow beneath the mask of his uniform. It hit Elijah like a weight. The truth. They weren't police. They were imposters, pretending to be authority so their hatred would carry the illusion of law. They didn't come to protect. They came to erase. Elijah's stomach twisted. His work, the years of sacrifice, the invention that carried hope for so many, was being torn apart under the guise of law and order. One yanked open a drawer, scattering notebooks. Let's see what the genius is hiding. Another stomped on papers. He thinks he can outsmart us? Not tonight, but in their frenzy they made a mistake. A console was knocked over. Wires sparked. A low hum filled the room. The invention activated itself. Light spilled across the walls, projections of circuits, equations, blueprints. The imposters froze, startled. What the hell is this? One muttered, then the projections shifted. Data appeared. Charts exposing disparities in resources, images of forgotten communities living without light. Numbers told a story of systemic neglect, carved into graphs too damning to ignore. The men's bravado faltered. But hatred doesn't vanish in the presence of truth. It fights harder. "Shut it down," one growled. He swung his baton, striking the machine. Sparks erupted, but instead of dying, the invention grew stronger. The walls lit brighter, alive with truth, and then the hidden function Elijah had buried deep within the machine awakened. The invention projected history, memory, erased. Voices, faces filled the walls. Black inventors robbed of credit. Scientists erased from textbooks, communities buried by silence. Forgotten brilliance resurrected in light. The imposters stumbled back, masks of authority slipping into fear. One smashed a chair against the console. Instead of silence, sound erupted. Voices filled the room, testimonies of injustice, cries for recognition, warnings from the past. The men clutched their ears, shouting over the noise, and then the final twist appeared on the wall. Live footage. Real-time images of the men themselves in their stolen uniforms wrecking the lab. Their faces, their actions captured and projected for all to see. Their authority dissolved in an instant. They weren't officers. They were criminals, caught by the very truth they tried to bury. Panic set in. One man lunged at the machine, but the projection followed him, capturing his rage for eternity. Another stumbled, his fake badge clattering to the floor as his mask of authority crumbled. The third froze, staring at his reflection projected larger than life on the wall, his power stripped bare. "You thought the law was on your side," Elijah said, stepping into the glow. His voice was calm but unshakable. "But truth has no uniform, and it will outlast you." The imposters exchanged frantic looks. Their fists clenched, but their courage fractured. "Let's get out of here," one hissed, his voice cracking. They ran, tripping over broken glass, stumbling through the door, vanishing into the night, but the machine kept projecting. Their crimes, their lies, their fear. The false authority they hid behind was gone, exposed for what it was. Hate, dressed in borrowed clothing. Elijah stood in the wreckage. Glass shattered. Papers destroyed. Machines dented. But his invention pulsed with life, brighter than ever. By morning, whispers spread across campus. Students spoke of strange lights. Neighbors spoke of uniforms that weren't real. A reporter came, curious about the lab break-in with a twist. Soon, Elijah's story wasn't hidden. It was everywhere. What those imposters had tried to destroy had become unstoppable. His invention was more than circuits. It was memory, justice, a mirror reflecting society's darkest truths. Elijah knew racism wouldn't vanish overnight, but he also knew something more powerful. Once the world sees the truth, it cannot unsee it. And so the question remains, how many more voices must be silenced before the world listens? How many more dreams must be attacked before we realize genius has no color? This isn't the end of the story, it's just one chapter in a much larger fight. If this story moved you, don't stop here. Watch our previous video for another powerful story they tried to erase. It's on your screen, tap it, and watch. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe, because your voice helps these stories reach the people who need them most.